another name that the Catskills were often known by. It's taken from Olana, and Olana was the home of the artist Frederick Church. He knew how to get to a location where you could see beautiful things, and he had this gorgeous view. Across the river is the town of Catskill. So why am I talking about the Hardenbergh Patent? I'm talking about the Hardenbergh Patent because it was the great patent. That's its other name. It was huge, right? And it wasn't most of all of these beautiful blue hills. Let's see the next slide. This is a painting by Jonathan Tubby, and he would be a painter in the 1800s who would be kind of in the Hudson River School. They loved to paint pictures of that river and the Catskill Mountains. So very often this is our first native school of painting, the Hudson River School of Painting. And this is from near Rhinebeck, supposedly this picture. Next, Carol. This one Carol's going to enlarge it for you. This is the first slide that says why the Hardenbergh Patent. The Hardenbergh Patent was huge. And on this map, we're comparing some of the other patents that were given in those days. So the green ones are Dutch lands, the largest of which was the Rensselaerwyck near Albany. And then in Westchester, there's Phillipsburg, Cortland patents. And then you're going to see a couple of English patents on there. Beekman patent, or Beekman patent, which would be just north of Poughkeepsie. And it goes down to where you live, Dana. I think you're in the Beekman patent if you look at your deed. And then Livingston Manor. But I want to talk about this one because it's going to affect a lot of history because it's so big. Another reason I want to talk about it is because I do family history and genealogy, and I was looking at the records of my family, and the Hardenbergh Patent keeps coming up, and I said, what is this? I have to find out a little bit more about it. And so that's how I started. So next slide. Now this is a description of property in the town of Fallsburg, and it's in the third allotment of Great Lot number 3. Now Fallsburg is Great Lot number 3. Neversink is Great Lot number 4, usually you'll see. Rockland is Great Lot number 4. And in Rockland, there's a town called Livingston Manor, right? Livingston Manor, the Livingstons where you're going to find are in on the patent. So, and Denning, Neversink has some 5, and then Denning has 6 and 7, parts of 6 and 7. So you can see that on that map that's on there. I don't have the county all mapped out, but that'll give you an idea of where you are. Towards the bottom of it, where there are all the little lots down there, 14 there would be Monticello, where Monticello is located. All right, that gives you a visual. And if you want to find out more, you can go compare it to our maps over here. You can locate wherever you live. So this piece of property is one that's near and dear to my heart. Next slide. This is the property where I grew up. My mom and dad's home. They bought it from my grandmother. It's now my brother James' home, so that's where he lives. and that's where, and you'll see on the bottom of it, it has that same description that I made larger for you that tells what part of the Hardenbergh Patent it's in. And you can do that with your deed. If you own property, here, check out your deed. It'll probably describe what part of the Hardenbergh Patent your property is in. You might not find all the derivation, like who owned it. In this case, I know Courtrights bought it from the Depews, and the Depews were related to the Hardenbergs, and Augustus Hardenbergh had it early on. So I have a definite connection to the Hardenbergh family. I have to tell you a little bit about the Hardenbergh name and the man. Johannes Hardenbergh. He was the second generation in his family to be in America. His father came from Holland, but the family originally was from Germany. And they lived in the Hardenburgh Mountains of Germany. There's a castle, that's the Hardenbergh Castle there. They have a coat of arms. And it's a bore, right? I don't want to bore you with this talk, but it is a bore. So next slide. And that's what I thought of when I saw the coat of arms. I said, where have I seen that cute little boar before? Boar's head meats. It says, this little piggy is in the market. Well, my little guy, Johannes Hardenbergh, was in the market too. And he was in the market for land. So that's how he decided he was going to make his wealth. Now, that's not that uncommon, so I want to explain in colonial times how it worked. When the Dutch were in New York, you saw their patents and their manners that they had. And they felt it was very important to give these land grants to the patroon. It was called the patroonship. And if you got a land grant, you had to promise that you would settle families right away. Because the Dutch were afraid. They were afraid those English in New England and in the southern colonies in Virginia were going to come and take their New Jersey, their Delaware, their New York. They wanted to settle. Now, nothing changed when the English took over. The Dutch came in 1624. By the 1660s, they're out of there. It didn't help them. They didn't save it. Peter Stuyvesant said, call out the troops. And everyone said, oh, heck with it. Let the English ships come in the harbor, and they took it over. But the English did the exact same thing. Now, what was their fear? Why did they want to settle the land so fast? The French. The French were in Canada. This was a century of warfare that went on and on between England and France for control of the beavers and the trade in America, so everyone wanted to settle as fast as they could do. And Johannes knew that this was the way that he could make his fortune. I have to get a drink. He was second generation in America, too. And he moved to Kingston from New York City. He was born in New York City. And in Kingston, he knew how to get a start by marrying a rich girl. Her name was Catherine Rutzen, and her father was one of the most important citizens of the area. He owned businesses and lots of land, so he married Catherine, and he operated her dad's store in Kingston, and within a year, he had control of it. I'm sure that was a willing thing the father gave it to him. But in his capacity as working at the store, he would travel out into the wilderness up the Esopus Valley near Kingston, and he would meet up with the Native Americans because he wanted to trade, right? You need to trade with them. And he also started signing some treaties with them to buy some of their land. I think that might be the next slide, Carol. Oh, but okay, so this one just shows you where he lived. If you can see it, it's small. This is the Old Mine Road. People familiar with the Old Mine Road? The Dutch built it. It's basically Route 209. It goes from Kingston to Port Jervis down along the Delaware Water Gap. And it's for copper mines and grist mills. So this would be the area of settlement. People would settle along this area. But he would go, he's going back, I don't need that, but up in here, he's going to go in the mountains. He's going to meet up with the Esopus Indians and start buying little pieces of land. So he made a treaty, and then he goes to the government in Kingston. He says, I would like to get this 250 acres of land, which I have title to because I got it from the Native Americans. So what would happen when you get title from the Native Americans? That land actually belongs to the king or the queen of England. It doesn't belong to you. You still have to get it approved from the king or queen. So he could say, I bought this, but it belongs to the government in England. So next slide will show you the government that you had to, we skipped.
Yeah.
All right, this fellow, now you're going to laugh because it's not true, it's real. This man is Lord Cornbury, and he was the colonial governor of New York and New Jersey. And he was not well liked. And so it was put out into the public sphere that he liked to dress up as a woman, that his wife approved, and he would do this for special occasions. So there's been in the New York Historical Society this painting through centuries of this person who's supposed to be Lord Cornbury dressed up as a woman. Recent research has shown, no, that wasn't him. That was political infighting, and they wanted to get rid of him, which was working. He'd been a good colonial governor. He had made sure the French didn't take over the English colony, but his enemies wanted him out, so they put all this false propaganda out about him. So now if you see this painting, now I go to the source of Alf Evers, the Catskills. He talks so much about the Hardenbergh Patent. It's an awesome source. But he has this as Lord Cornbury, because this is a recent development where we decided it's really not him. The next is his boss. This is Queen Anne of England, and you have the dates of when she ruled. She was the last of the Stuart monarchs, and Anne had no surviving children. She had one son who grew up. All of her other pregnancies did not do well, and so by the time she died, the throne went over to the Hanovers, which would be George I, II, and III, which we're very famous with our American Revolution. But that's Queen Anne. She had to give you the land grant. All right, so I told you that he went around buying land. This is one of the pieces of land he bought, and he bought it from this Native American, the sign of the turtle. He was in the turtle clan of the Esopus, because obviously this man wasn't writing his name, but that's one piece of property that he bought. Okay, so he puts in his petitions. He keeps on changing his story. He says, a small tract of land, desiring to settle an improvement. Then he says, several tracts and parcels. It's changing. Hilly and rocky, nobody else would want it. Why can't I have it? And then, I lawfully purchased it. Now, everything on this is not true. Number one, it wasn't a small piece of land he was interested in buying. It was a huge piece. You know, the Hardenbergh Patent is now said to be 2 million acres. It covers a lot of Sullivan, Delaware, Ulster, some of Greene County, and even a little bit of Orange County. It's bigger than the state of Delaware. It's twice as big as the state of Rhode Island. It's not little. Several tracts and parcels, hilly and rocky. Well, some of it was hilly and rocky, but he knew better. He knew there was the Esopus River Valley. He knew there was the Neversink River Valley, right? The Delaware River Valley, West Branch and East Branch, all of those were on his mind, good for farming. And nobody else is there. It's a century of warfare, so we can pull the wool over on people's eyes, perhaps, and get all of this land. Lawfully purchased. Well, I'm trying to lawfully purchase it. You know, anytime I meet a Native American, I purchase some. But then I'll see him again. He said, oh, you got to purchase this. You didn't purchase it. The Indians were playing their game too. You know, they didn't want to let him have it. So he put together something called Hardenbergh and Company. Because there were some understood rules about getting land. 2,000 acres per person, has to be surveyed, has to be lawfully purchased. No government people can get in on this. So if you're working in the government, you can't get a land grant. And it has to be settled within 5 years. All of these things didn't happen. Number one, it wasn't surveyed. He surveyed north and west boundary a little bit. He got the survey to do it, but most of it wasn't. It wasn't lawfully purchased, and he definitely was not going to get it settled in 5 years, right? He spent the rest of his life trying to consolidate his claims for it. He had tried to get the surveys done. He kept buying land. He kept defending his boundaries in court. He threw the squatters off if they came. You know, he was really trying to do this. Poor man. In his 70s, he was out on a trail surveying. And that was in 1740s. He was surveying because he was finally trying to get it surveyed all around so that all the people who were partners could get their share and do something with it. You can't sell it till it's surveyed. You can't sell it till you know which part is yours. So here's one of the partners. This is Faneuil Hall in Boston, and the father of the guy who built this was in on the deal. He was a rich merchant in New York. That's fine. 2 relatives of Johannes Hardenbergh were in on it. That's fine too. But there were 2 other people in on it who were really dummy partners who were cloaking that the acting attorney general of the state and another official were getting some of the land. And the worst part of it is the surveyor was going to get a 7 of it, of everybody's section, for doing the work. That's how he was going to be paid. And he was supposed to survey a smaller request from the town of Hurley, but he delayed because he didn't want to get the 7th of that. He wanted this, right? So this is a really a big deal in those days. And people knew it. They knew that after 30 years, nothing is happening. You're not sure if you couldn't buy land from them. You're not sure they owned it, right? So it's really a mess in the early days of the... Now you saw this map before, but I pulled it up again because I wanted you to say, so to notice the Livingston Manor, which is... Keep going, Carol, keep going. Oh dear. Well, there it is, Livingston Manor. And the Livingston family came from Scotland. And 2nd generation Livingston, Robert L. Livingston, looked across the river from his home called Claremont. And you may know Claremont for the fame of Claremont's the first steamboat on the Hudson. His son helped Robert Fulton get that going. So he looked across at those beautiful mountains and he saw the mess that was going on. He said, maybe I can get in on this. By the time he wanted to do this, 1740, only 2 of the original patentees were still alive. Their descendants had been willed the land, so he approached him. He kept approaching. By the time he and his business partner were done, they owned almost half of the Hardenbergh Patent. So that's why you may know Neversink was owned by Livingston and Verplanck, his partner. Rockland, he wanted to call Livingston Manor or the town of Rockland Westfield. That's an old name for Roscoe and Livingston Manor, you may know that. And his grandson lived in Livingston Manor. And he was known as Dr. Edward Livingston. He wasn't really a doctor, but he was also a very good person to the town, and so they named it for him, Livingston Manor. So, you can find more of what parts he owned there. Okay, let's see a little bit of, this is Robert and his wife, Maria, no problem. On we go. This is their wonderful home, Claremont, overlooking the Hudson. And this is the view that I talked about that he would have of the Hudson. Okay, so Robert, he said, I got to get a survey done. Hardenburgh guys you can't sell the land unless you get a survey. So he hired this fellow to do a survey, and you don't have it. This man's name is Cockburn, and he worked for years doing a survey. And when he finished the survey, you'll notice you see nothing about Catskills on there. Robert wanted to name the Catskill Mountain the Lothian Mountains after a county in Scotland where his father came from. But that didn't work. On we go. You see where the Delaware River is and stuff? Right? This is the East Branch, the West Branch. Notice the East Branch is called, I think it's called the Papacton. And we have a road that's just outside of Brainsville, Papacton Hollow Road, that goes up to the East Branch of the Delaware. Anybody know about that? And that was an old Indian trail. They would come to near Brainsville and then take that trail up to the river. That's why the Battle of Chestnut Woods was where it was, because the militia knew that's where the Indians are going to be, because they're going to go up that trail.
Ooh.
This is just a close-up on it. It doesn't matter too much, but it shows Denning, Neversink, all the towns that we know. another map. This was a map done in 1795. American Revolution's over. People are seriously now thinking of settling, right? So you have to have a good map. And this is called the Wine Coop map. He made it very beautiful. It's gorgeous, but he mislabeled the lots, so that's kind of a problem. But it's a lovely map anyway. Just one more map, and then we're on. Next map is a map that's in the Sullivan County Historical Society, hanging on a wall. And it's a very old map, probably 1802, 3 or 4. I can't read that name, but it's based on a survey done in the late 1700s. You can't find out much from it. It's faded, it's ripped, but it's really a primary source. So if you ever go there, it's on the second floor. Take a look at it, right? Really nice map. Okay, that's how the patent got issued and how it dilly-dallied around and nothing happened. Now I just want to talk about a few Hardenberghs that are associated with it. This man was the son of Johannes. His name is Colonel Johannes Hardenbergh. He was a patriot in the American Revolution. He knew George Washington. George Washington slept there, or else George Washington visited his house for sure. That's just my, he did. George Washington was everywhere. Martha stayed there. The governor of the state of New York, the first governor, anybody know who that is? George Clinton also visited. And this house burned in 1911, but it was a really substantial place. He owned a lot of the patent, and he was trading it around and giving it to his sons. He had a big family, he had a lot of sons. So 4 of his sons were patriots too. There was Johannes Jr., Gerardus, Lewis, and one that I want to talk about a little bit is a Dutch Reform minister, Jacob Rutsen Hardenbergh. He's probably the most famous of the sons, and he has a lot to do with the founding of Rutgers College. It was called Queen's College then, and he spoke out very bravely from the pulpit for the American Revolution cause. Oh, now we get to another important Hardenbergh. This would be a nephew of the man I just spoke about, a grandson of Johannes, and he is important because he saved our history. The history of our colony started out with the Dutch, and when the English took over, they took the Dutch records because there was no big war. It was just, you want to help me, said Peter Stuyvesant. People said no, and then the British came and they kept the records. Very important records of the Dutch colony. And then the English colonial records. And then the Revolution started, the Declaration of Independence came, and we formed our own government. And we formed it in White Plains and Fishkill. We kept moving our little capital because the British are coming. The British are coming. We finally got our capital to Kingston. And it was there that our Constitution was written, and our first legislature took office, and our first governor, George Clinton, took office. And Kingston was not the capital long, maybe 6 months if we're lucky, because guess what? The British are coming. And so they had to decide, what are we going to do with our precious records? And a member of the legislature was Johannes G. Hardenbergh, who lived in Kerhonkson. And his house was right where the road 4455 turns off to go to New Paltz. Just before that, there's a historical marker there. The house is no longer there, but that's where he lived. And he said, we'll take them to my house. 10 wagon loads of records were taken 4 days before the British came, 4 days. And of course, the British did come. Of course, they burnt the Senate House. Let's see a picture of the Senate House. It was built before that time, and it is stone, so it's been rebuilt. But anybody ever go there? There's a nice museum in Kingston, a good place to visit if you want to learn about New York State history. First capital of the state. Hurley says we're the second capital, because the records got moved from Marbletown to Hurley, and then they were gradually going upriver until we got to Albany. So let's see Johannes G. Hardenbergh's home. This is the historical marker near where his house is. I'm not sure what condition it's in now, but the house is no longer there. Here's his house. The door says it was built in 1762, stone. doesn't matter much. It's small. They say he put all the records in one of these rooms, and he had a whole bunch of kids. So they were probably all crowded in there, but he did a good service. So I'm proud of him. You know, he saved ours. I love doing research with the old Dutch records because my ancestors came from the Netherlands to that colony. And this is the interior of his house. The house did not last. You could tell by looking at the last slide. It was falling down. So in 1921, some people bought it, and then they were going to demolish it. And then this man from Delaware, who had a lot of money and a museum, said, let me take out the interior beams and floors. So he put up a typical Dutch-style home in this museum, the Winterthur Museum in Delaware. So now we're on, so that's where that is. But the next thing is a connection with Sojourner Truth. Everybody knows Sojourner Truth. She was born into slavery in New York, and supposedly she was born in the home of a Hardenbergh. Various records, some say Johannes the Colonel, others say Gerardus, his brother, but she was born in Hurley, and she lived the first 30 years of her life in slavery in New York. She didn't be a slave to, she was sold after a while, but a lot of her family had been sold. But New York gradually freed slaves. They first freed the children who were, born, and then in the 1820s, she finally gained her freedom. She became such a spokesman for women's rights and rights of her people that were being enslaved. Swarthkill is, Hurley. And this is a little historic map of Hurley. You can just, the next slide, no, Carol, you don't have to. The next slide just shows an enlargement, and this is what this map says, Colonel Johannes Hardenbergh's house in 1775, but the historical side says 1779. They don't know for sure when she was born. Okay, another Hardenbergh to speak about. These are Sullivan County Hardenberghs. I spoke about the war heroes from the American Revolution, but the Hardenberghs in Sullivan County are most personified by what we read in Quinlan's history about Gross Hardenbergh. Are people familiar with Gross? Gross Hardenbergh? Well, Gross Hardenbergh is really Gerardus Hardenbergh, and he is a hero of the American Revolution who saved the settlement of Wawarsing with 6 or 7 soldiers against 400 Native Americans and Tories. He did a good job. But then in later years, he had supposedly a problem with alcohol, He couldn't be responsible. So his father, Colonel Johannes, with the rich man's house, kind of disinherited him. I'm still back on that other one, Carol. Doesn't matter, but he disinherited him, and he instead, in his will, he said, you don't get it, your wife Nancy gets it, and all your children get your section of land. So he didn't get anything. But then his wife passed away before he did, and then some of his children passed away. And then he decided he was going to go into the Neversink River Valley, that's between Woodburn and Hasbrook up to Neversink Flats, the town, and reclaim the land that should have been his. So he would ride up and down, knock on people's doors, and say, you need to pay me rent because you're a tenant on my land, or you can evacuate, move up on the hills or something, and give me my land back. Some people paid him. Some people fought him. Some people refused, right? So he would gather up the crops, and he put it in his son's barn. His son was Dr. Benjamin Hardenbergh. And then, of course, people burned the barn down. And then Gross said, well, maybe we should evacuate this county. We'll move back into Ulster County and be safe. It was still Ulster County back then anyway, but he moved back toward Kingston and kept away for a while. But then he got his courage back. So in 1808, he decided, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get my land. So he started riding the valleys again. And the people had had it with him. So from ambush, 3 people shot him in the back, off his horse, in Woodburn, opposite the Dutch Reformed Church. Nobody knew what happened to him. He thought he had a heart attack, or he thought his horse flew through him. But when he died, they found the bullet, and they realized he'd been murdered. They tried to find out who did it, but I don't know how seriously they tried. They never put anyone on trial for it.
Look at the blood.
Now, the reason I bring him up is because the whole Hardenbergh patent was tenant land, and you owe those rents. So a big event in New York State history is the anti-rent war, which took place from 1839 to 1845, where the renters rebelled. It all started when Rensselaerwick owner had debts. And when he died in his will, he said to his kids, hey kids, you can either sell your part of the land or you can get the back rents, which I never got. They said, let's get the back rents. So they went to get the back rents, and this started the anti-rent war in the Hardenburghs, and it moved down into Delaware and Ulster County. Why is it important? It's important because finally, people who didn't own land were starting to make their presence known, and they were going to get rights. New York State eventually, in a couple of years after this, changed their constitution, because before that, you had to own property to vote, right? So they were getting their freedom. So the anti-rent war is a very important event in the history of, and it's because it was the big patent, and you couldn't really own the land. That next slide was just, that's a mask. They used to mask up, dress like Native Americans, and they would tar and feather people. I think a sheriff got killed. This caused laws to be passed in New York, saying that if you are there at this event where someone's killed, you're just as guilty. If you're wearing a mask, you're not allowed to wear any kind of, you're just as guilty. So you can't mask up, Dana, and you cannot be present where someone's murdered. So change the laws of the state, anti-rent war. This is our last Sullivan County connection. You guys doing okay? I'm not. You doing okay? Okay, so this is the old stone house in Hasbrook. Now, the old stone house in Hasbrook was built probably around 1810, something like that. And it was owned in 1840 by a very prominent, rich citizen named Anthony Hasbrook, and the settlement is named for him eventually. And this was Hardenburgh land, or Gross would have said it was Hardenburgh land, but he had bought some land that had been belonged to the Hardenburgh family when a person died. But the relative of this person, whose name was Cornelius Hardenbergh, said, hey, I didn't get enough money, I need more money. And Cornelius was the grandson of Gross, which is kind of, I don't know why. He also had a problem supporting his family, paying for the land that he owned in the town of Rockland. So he wanted more money. So he goes to challenge Anthony. If you want to read more about Anthony Hasbrook and the Stone House, that's in Quinlan's history. You can find that story, which is one of the legends of our county. But he goes, shows up at Sunday dinner, and says, I want more money. And Anthony Hasbrook says, no, you got a fair amount of money. Go by. And he went out the door. But he comes right back with 2 guns and a knife. And he starts stabbing and shooting Anthony Hasbrook in front of his wife, his granddaughter, and his aunt. And of course, he kills him within 15 minutes. And everybody knows who did it. You're watching him. So he's arrested. He goes on trial in Monticello, and he's supposedly the first person to be hung in Sullivan County. He's hung at the courthouse in Monticello. He has to have his slippers in his casket with him. Slippers. And this is Anthony's grave. Now, Anthony is buried in Bealey Cemetery, which is also called Fallsburg Nevertheless Cemetery, is below where the reservoir is. And Benjamin Hardenbergh is also buried there, and a lot of people who are in these stories, because that's where the Hardenberghs, their valley, but that's Anthony's grave. The reason that I put this one up is just to show you that this is the Hasbrook house, and look who owned it later. Thomas Hardenbergh. So, it passed into different hands, but the Hardenberghs owned it one way. This is Hasbrook, the old bridge that's no longer there. The bridge is now over here. when they built a new bridge, but kind of, that's an 1875 map. This little guy I had to put up. This is Hasbrook School, and this is little Frank Hardenbergh. And he went to school with my grandmother, and she had that picture of him. She said, that's the school, and there's Frank. And Frank was a World War I vet. He went off to France. He had the same problem I have. His voice was affected by the gases that they had there. But he came back, and he was postmaster of Hasbrook, and a good upstanding citizen. All right, Frank. And this is what the house looks like today, the old stone house. It was taken over decades ago by the concerned citizens of Hasbrook. I think it's kind of not being taken care of as much anymore. It needs a little painting, but it's a beautiful, beautiful structure. And we should treasure it because there aren't too many stone houses in Sullivan County. Oh, back. Okay, this next section is my last personality. He's an architect, and I just love him. He's Henry Janeway Hardenburgh, and he lived, you have his dates on there, and he designed so many iconic buildings in New York, in Boston, in Washington, in Rutgers. So when he first started out, he designed buildings on the Rutgers campus. But back one, Carol, don't go on until, this is the Dakota Apartments next to Central Park. What's it famous for?
Central Park. Oh,
You see that dark little door?
Yeah.
John Lennon was killed at the Dakota Apartments. That always makes me so sad, but this was designed by Henry Janeway Hardenbergh. And he was in on the ground floor, so to speak, about building skyscrapers. Just to build a tall building, this was new in those days, and this is his first skyscraper. This is the Willard Hotel, I think, if I got it, yes. The Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. in the 1920s. He designed that building. There's another picture of it today. It's still in use. It's a really great place to stay when you go to Washington, D.C. Beautiful interiors. I didn't put pictures of that, but really nice building. Whitehall Building, who knows it? The Whitehall Building in southern Manhattan. Did you go there? Yeah, want to talk about it? My husband went there and passed his physical to be inducted in the Army in the 1970s. And he said, no way, I'm going to go join up with the Air Force. Well, he did. You know the story of Arlo Guthrie, Alice's Restaurant. He went down there too. And because he threw out his garbage where he wasn't supposed to, he didn't get inducted. So that's a cute little story. But Whitehall is down near the Bowery in really southern Manhattan. Very famous building. That's him. This is famous too. The Plaza Hotel. And it's next to Central Park. And it's owned by the Trumps right now. And Ivana ran it very well, they say. She was a very good person to run the plaza. Oh, here we go. This is my Copley Plaza Hotel in Boston, in Copley Plaza, named for John Singleton Copley. That's what the plaza's named for. And it's still around too. Still being, people are still staying in today. So he's an awesome, just an awesome guy. And there are other things he designed. He designed the Waldorf Hotel. He designed the Astoria Hotel. They're no longer around because they tore them down to make the Empire State Building, but there are many buildings that he designed. So I like him, Henry. We're wrapping it up, aren't you glad? This is just a map that shows you, the brown line is the Hardenbergh Patent. And it shows some of the counties, right? One is enclosed almost all the way inside the Hardenbergh Patent. I see it there, the blue line, right? The blue line is Catskill Park. It's entirely within it. And then there's the New York City watershed. Every single reservoir is in it. Not all the watershed, not right? Paxton, Cannonsville, Schoharie, Ashokian, Rondout, Neversink, they're all in the Hardenbergh Patent. Now, is that important? Why is this a watershed area? Why is this a Catskill Park? Could be something to do with the geography, but it could also be something to do with the slow speed with which this place was developed. You know, it stayed wild and beautiful. And then there was a Hardenbergh, his name was Cornelius A.C. Hardenbergh, and he was a supervisor in Ulster County, and he decided that when people are selling their land in the mountains for tax sale, Ulster County is going to buy it. So Ulster County would buy it, but then they couldn't pay what they owed the state. So we had to think of a new idea. He got elected to the state assembly. He goes up to Washington, up to Albany, and then with a partner whose name is kind of funny, Hasbrook. Those Hasbrook and Hardenbergs do get along. They go up there and they say, well, the state should buy the land, and the state should never sell any land that they buy. It should, and then we should create a forever wild Catskill Park, and that's what was done with a little bit of pushing and shoving. And then, of course, in Ulster County, you can just give your land over to the state, then we won't have to pay those taxes. So that gives us the Catskill Park. This is sort of out of order, but town of Hardenburgh is in Ulster County. It's kind of like the north end of the, that's an old map of Sullivan County. And Carol, you always ask me, when was this map made and who made it? I know this map is before there was Fallsburg, town of Fallsburg in 1826, but I don't know much more about it. That's an interesting old map. What does this have to do with anyway? Newburgh-Scheckman Turnpike. You know, roads started being, when people started settling the patent, they started thinking about we need roads. So that's like old 17K and 17M. It goes to Coshecton on the river. A very early road in the 1800s. And then, of course, tanning came. The land wasn't settled. It's mostly trees, beautiful trees, clear water, until we get the tanning going and we pollute the water. But we had what we needed for an industry from, and here's a little sign for the forest preserve. Now, the state constitution, about 10 years after this whole deal made by Cornelius and his friend, they passed the new state constitution. In New York, we have a strange system where every 10 years or 20 years, I think it's 20 years, we put our constitution up and say, do you want to have a constitutional convention? Did you ever vote on that? It's sometimes on the back of the ballot, they always ask you, do you want to do a constitutional convention or not? And they did one in the 1890s, and in it, they protected the Catskill Park and said it's forever wild. It will never be developed except by New York City. Okay. And of course, this is my ending slide. This is the Neversink Reservoir. It's near where I live. My father and grandfather's home are there, but that's the only other development that has really happened in this area. Reservoirs in New York City. It's a huge thing. Now, so basically, this concludes my talk. But if you have questions or anything you'd like to add to it. I love the Hardenbergs. You know, I do. I'm not, I don't, just because I tell that story, but, you know, if you're looking for sources, like I said, Alf Evers is a wonderful book, The Catskills. Quinlan's is fun. It tells you what parts of the patent various people had, especially the Livingston family, because they're kind of, and Shirley Temple Fulton, yes, wrote a good book about the Livingston Manor area, which talks a lot about the Hardenbergh Patent. So if you're looking for sources, that would be good sources to go to. Any questions?